This is the medieval era bathed in the glory of the church, where innocent girls are convicted as witches and tied to a fiery frame, priests sell redemption vouchers, and watch as the Black Death spreads through the Dark Ages. Here are the ruling knights holding crosses and swords, wearing shiny armor, and wielding the holy light. This place is also plagued by demons, and every night when the moon is full, they will emerge from the gates of hell, slaughtering all living beings in this earthly hell. It seems as if witnessing the world gradually giving birth to professionals who can fight against the church and demons amidst the destructive humanity. They use the power of demons to fight against demons, and are known as demon hunters. Leon, who possesses the ability to absorb the talent of slain demons, seems destined to become the most powerful demon hunter. Let's hunt down those people trapped in darkness. Leon. Keywords of the novel. Medieval Demon Hunters without pop-ups, complete download of Medieval Demon Hunters TXT, and reading of the latest chapters of Medieval Demon Hunters. Chapter 1. Magic Hunting Hand. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Magic Hunting Hand. In the dim and damp room, a dazzling beam of light shone through the narrow window onto Leon's face. He covered his eyes with the back of his hand, propped up his body, and looked at the window with a small opening in confusion. 3 philosophical questions popped up in my mind. Who am I? Where do I come from? Where am I going? But soon, the chaotic thoughts in his mind were cleared away. All memories spontaneously emerge, like pages unfolding in a book, without the need for reflection, as if they were all his own experiences. There are both modern Leons and the original owner of this body, Tiberi Leons. The fact is, he traveled through a period resembling the Middle Ages and became the only son of a country baron. The reason why it is said to be a period resembling the Middle Ages is because in the original owner's memory, it was an era with supernatural powers. For example, Norway had a dragon training ranch, and the Viking flagship battleships used sea dragon skeletons as keels, which allowed them to sweep across the North Sea. In the Mediterranean, sea monsters often appear, causing storms and typhoons. Last week, a merchant ship departing from Messina was said to have been buried in the belly of sea monsters. Adjacent villages were also destroyed overnight by werewolves and turned into ruins. When the knights of the church arrived, skeletons were everywhere that had been not a part of course. These are all legends that he has never seen with his own eyes, and it is possible that the ones he remembers belong to the unique feudal superstition stories of this era, such as the wolf grandmother and the 7 dwarves. But soon, supernatural forces appeared before him without warning, destroying his materialistic beliefs. At this moment, a yellowed parchment notebook floated in front of him without any warning. On the cover is, Hunter's Hand Ja. A few dark and blood-stained large characters, which may be Latin letters or Chinese characters. In short, he can understand that this is not a physical text, but a kind of thought that exists in consciousness. He reached out to touch it, but went straight through the cover. This Pokémon book is not a physical existence. Is it an illusion? He hesitated for a moment before attempting to open it with his consciousness, and everything came naturally. After opening, the first page of the Hunter's Hand was still made of parchment material with a dark yellow color and bloodstains. The originally blank first page also gradually appeared as he gazed, possibly in Latin or Chinese characters. Character: Leon Tebeli, Leon, title. Apprentice Knight, heir of Baron Tebeli rating. Novice Monster Hunter, you are almost as weak as an ordinary person, and a few strong farmers can leave you at a loss. Faced with demons, you can only shiver. Skill: Basic Knight Training Method, Rating E, you have mastered basic riding skills and the ability to use cavalry guns and swords for combat. Black Death Healer, Rating C, you have successfully fought against the Black Death that people talk about and turn pale, and obtained antibodies from it, significantly increasing your resistance to the Black Death and almost never getting sick again. Talent: Monster Hunting, Rating Unknown, you will draw a talent from any demon you kill. Killed demon. None acquired talent. None, This is the content of the first page. He suppressed his inner astonishment and turned to the second page. Casting page, by injecting materials, specific equipment can be synthesized. This feature is not yet enabled. After hunting any demon, the casting function will be unlocked. If you flip back further, it will be completely blank. He shook his head and looked at the demon hunter in front of him, his thoughts racing in his head. Hunting demons, that is to say, there are really demons in this world, so the legends that Lion, the original owner of this body, has heard are probably true. Is it this book that took me through time, so this thing is my essential golden finger for travelers? He cleared his throat and said, "Hey, can you send me back to my original world?" The unfamiliar and familiar voice made Leon frown slightly, and this book did not answer Leon's doubts. It was like a simple dead object, quietly suspended in mid-air. It seems that it's not possible. It's also true that traveling through this kind of thing will definitely cost a lot. How could this book easily take me back? He could only organize his thoughts, intending to first outline the general outline of the world and the background of his own era. Now Europe is shrouded in the terrible disaster of the Black Death, the pestis, which is said to have killed 1/3 of Europe's population. Even in later generations, this terrible disease may not be the same, because the two worlds may not be the same at all, but there are some similarities in history. This is due to the consideration that there may be demons present in this world. In short, even on the Earth where Leon is located in 2020, the reputation of the Black Death is still thunderous. And the original owner also died from the Black Death. After he fell ill, he refused the treatment of a plague doctor wearing a crow's beak mask invited by his father from Syracuse and isolated himself. He believes that these so-called doctors have never saved a life, and on the contrary, all the people they have treated have died without exception. This young man believes that those plague doctors wearing crow masks are the embodiment of death, specifically coming to the human world to harvest life. He is extremely afraid of death, but this has not changed his outcome. It is too difficult to defeat the Black Death solely based on human immunity. I just don't know what happened, but after he crossed over, his Black Death miraculously healed. He took off his shirt, and the originally dark skin had indeed faded away. The 2 abscesses under his armpit had healed, presenting scars the size of 2 eggs. The dry dead skin covered it and peeled off with just a rub. The characteristics of these black dead patients had disappeared from him. This should also be the origin of the Pokémon hunter using his Black Death Healer skill. As soon as Leon cleared his mind, he fell into a deep depression, completely devoid of the pleasure of lifting his golden fingers. For many disappointed individuals, time travel may mean about to write a magnificent epic, break free from current difficulties, and become a winner in life. But he is different. Firstly, his parents are both well off and his family is prosperous. Secondly, he has achieved success in his studies and his career is thriving, and he is about to earn his first bucket of gold in life. Thirdly, he is physically healthy, without disasters or illnesses, handsome, tall, and is already a half-life winner template. Even if he becomes the heir of a small lord, what about medieval nobles, even if they become kings and have prominent power? Isn't it still living in the Middle Ages, where feces are dumped casually, odors are rampant, and diseases are rampant? Is the game no longer fun or the novel no longer enjoyable? He tries to empty his mind, wanting to dispel this low mood, but oftentimes you should be uplifted now instead of feeling dejected, and still cannot take action. Alright, Leon, let's work hard to survive first. Let's consider it as a long-term public travel or a very advanced VR role-playing game. And demons, dragons, werewolves, and so on, these quite magical things that ordinary people can't even see. In modern society, even Jack Ma, with billions of furniture, can experience any happiness. It's nothing more than eating, drinking, and having fun. How can he compare to experiencing this magnificent, thrilling and exciting medieval era in person? He comforted himself and hypnotized himself over and over again, although he still felt that being someone like Jack Ma was far happier than traveling through time, his sense of frustration was no longer as strong. The most indispensable thing for a person is their goal, and the short-term goal they set for themselves is very simple, which is to play the role of their Leon well, not to be seen as different from before, and then be possessed as a devil and tied to the stake. And the long-term goal is probably to try hunting a demon. Since there is an extraordinary door waiting for him to push open, he naturally wants to give it a try, although hunting demons sounds very dangerous. Leon coughed and felt his throat dry to death. He quickly took a clay jar from the desk by the window and poured it into his mouth. He felt like he was reborn, and even the obvious odor in the water didn't feel as severe. Lion's father, Baron Tebele, was a vassal under the Count of Syracuse, and his territory was the small town of Tebele in the southern part of Sicily. With a population of over 500, he could be considered a highly influential and powerful baron. However, this could not change the derogatory title given to him by the aristocrats of large cities as a country lord. The situation of medieval lords attacking each other was still very serious. Large and small lords ate small fish and scattered throughout Europe, becoming nobles. After losing the war, there was a high probability that their lives would not be safe, but the prerequisite was that someone would pay you a ransom. However, since King William II of Sicily cleared the internal turmoil, the situation in Sicily has become increasingly stable, and the Count Campbell of Syracuse, the great feudal lord to whom Baron Tebele was loyal, has considerable strength, which can also ensure that his small feudal lords are not disturbed by foreign enemies. Syracuse was once the largest city in Sicily, and during the classical era, it was one of the most powerful Greek city-states. At its peak, the city had a population of 200,000, with over 1 million people under its rule. Its strength surpassed that of Carthage, the North African power of Hannibal, and the Peloponnesian alliance led by Spartans. But later on, the already declining Syracuse was destroyed by the Romans and further declined. Later, it was invaded by the Huns and the East Goths. The population of Syracuse today is less than 10,000, but including Baron Tebele, Count Campbell of Syracuse had more than 20 vassals of all sizes under his command. In an emergency, he was able to mobilize nearly 100 knights and thousands of soldiers, making him a powerful figure in the Kingdom of Sicily. I don't even remember who William II was. The names of these Western kings come from several generations, and it's impossible to distinguish them. The only one in my mind who can accurately name me is probably the first French King Louis XVI who was put to the guillotine. No, it should also include Elizabeth. How many lifetimes? Forget it, what do I think these messy things are for? However, according to Lyon's memory, this Sicilian king has just cleared the internal turmoil for a year, and the whole country is in a state of rest and recovery. It is unlikely that there will be any war with other countries in the short term. After all, expanding further north will be the territory of the Papal States. Apart from the filial Son of God, Francis, no one dares to attack the Pope, right? Thinking of this, his mind relaxed slightly. Not knowing how to fight meant that he and his father would not be summoned to the battlefield by the Count of Campbell in Syracuse in the short term. There is still time for development. He suddenly frowned and raised his arm to the tip of his nose, twitching it. Suddenly, a faint sour smell hit him. He immediately realized that as a Christian, he hardly bathed. It is said that the mother of King Henry IV was canonized as a saint by the Church because she never bathed for a lifetime, especially during the ravages of the Black Death. It is widely believed that bathing will open pores, increase the possibility of virus entry, and make people less likely to take a shower. Upon realizing this, Leon's heart, which had just calmed down, suddenly felt a wave of despair, as it meant that he would soon live a life full of stench with those people in this dark and damp castle. And in the future, he is likely to marry a similarly smelly aristocratic wife and be supervised by her, forced to live a life without bathing. Gone. P.S. The first king to be guillotined was King Charles I of England, and Leon remembered it wrong. End of this chapter. 2. in Chapter 2, Burn the Witch to Death. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2, Burn that witch to death. My mentality has collapsed. He rubbed his face, trying to calm himself down, but then realized that he had rubbed a hand with oil stains, and his mentality suddenly became even more broken. He sniffed and felt a bit like crying. It took him a long time to recover. Then he picked up the earthen jar on the table and took 2 sips of water, silently reciting the 4 words, stable aura. In fact, there is no need to worry about marrying a stinky wife. Perhaps your future wife will not only be stinky but also old and ugly. This was not uncommon in the Middle Ages when political alliances flourished, or maybe he was taken to the stake as a demon possession before he even got married. People say, too early to be happy, but now I can be said to be feeling sad too early. People cannot always worry about the possibility of bad things happening, because there is a worse possibility. Zhou Shuren. After adjusting his mindset, Liang still had the interest to self-deprecate and said, why did my first thought naturally come to me as a girl when I thought I couldn't take a shower? Is it because when I was in school, I was too focused on studying and never had a romantic relationship, so I always felt regret subconsciously? Lipped lightly, in fact, Leon was well aware that his heart was still uncomfortable and he didn't want to accept the reality in front of him, so he started talking to himself to divert his attention. To avoid being heard by people outside the door, his voice is very low. I feel hungry after drinking a lot of water. Leon found a plate of completely cold food in front of his room door, with a wooden tray filled with light green pea soup, a small bar of white bread, and some wilting berries. This was probably delivered last night. During the self-isolation period of the original owner, the servant would bring food from the secret door below every day, but it seemed that he did not have time to enjoy this final dinner. Leon leaned in and sniffed, and a faint sour smell came in. Unfortunately, ordinary civilians cannot afford to eat such food once a year. Baron Tebeli is located in southern Sicily, with a typical Mediterranean climate and a warm and humid environment almost all year round. His room is located within the Tebeli family castle, which is even darker and more humid than outside. It is only natural for food to spoil overnight. It's time to go out and find something to eat. With this in mind, he sighed and said, before I traveled, I had just finished dinner with a client and was about to go home. Unfortunately, my mother leaves a light for me every night. Sadness came from within, and he quickly shifted his attention. Now is not the time to mourn and cry. Standing in front of the door, his hand had just lifted but couldn't help but put it down. I don't know how much Baron Tbilisi pays attention to the details of his son's daily life. What if he gets caught? Simply stay here and pretend to be isolated. Cowardly thoughts flashed by. No, I can't stay here for a lifetime. Since I have to leave sooner or later, it doesn't matter. He now has a nervous feeling of passing answers to his desk mate in front of the teaching director during the midterm exam. Relax, you are Lion now, you have all his memories, you are not a fake, and Lion died of the Black Death. You are not the culprit, you need to take responsibility for inheriting his body, and even take responsibility for protecting his family, but you don't need to be responsible for his death, let alone feel guilty. Leon took a deep breath, raised his hand again, pulled out the crossbar on the door that resembled a bolt, and then forcefully pushed open the heavy iron door. Outside was a dim corridor, with walls on both sides blackened by torches, and the narrow windows casting a faint light that was far dimmer than his own room. There is a drowsy servant guarding here, his face full of fatigue, clearly not resting for a long time. His name is Nelson, and he is a close servant of Baron Tebeli. Since Lion locked himself in his room, Baron Tebeli has dispatched his personal servants to wait here, and he is also in charge of daily trivial matters such as delivering meals to Lion. Leon shouted in Latin, "Wake up, Nelson." Nelson suddenly woke up and looked at Leon, tears welling up in his eyes. He hurriedly got up from the ground, grabbed Leon's hand, and trembled, saying, "Young Master Leon, you have finally come out. "Nelson, you don't have to." His reaction was somewhat unexpected for Leon. He thought that when he came out, others would be afraid to avoid him, even if he had already recovered. People are all selfish, even the medical staff who people usually support with their mouths will still be rejected by the community owners when an epidemic occurs. Medieval people were not foolish either. They knew that the Black Death would spread through infected individuals and would adopt isolation measures to cope with the epidemic. But they don't know about the incubation period, nor do they know that the source of infectious diseases is from mice rather than humans. Upon a brief search in his memory, Leon understood the other party's loyalty. Lion's mother passed away a long time ago, and Baron Tebele has been alone for many years without remarriage, which is quite rare for medieval nobles who used marriage as an important political means. In history, the Habsburg family established their dominant position in Europe through marriage, indicating the importance of marriage. Therefore, Lion is the only heir of the entire Tebele family, and such close male servants often prosper and suffer alongside the main family. His father, grandfather, great-grandfather have served the Tebele family for generations. Once the Tebele family dies, servants like him can only become commoners. Binding interests is the fundamental way to maintain loyalty. Leon worked hard to maintain his previous habits and tone, and with a hint of joy in his tired tone, he said, "Thank God, I felt much better last night. I woke up from a deep sleep and realized that I had recovered. So the quarantine ended and I successfully escaped that damn cage." Nelson quickly drew a cross on his forehead and said happily, "Thank God, it's really great. I'm going to inform Lord Tbilisi, he will definitely be very happy." Liang Lien hurriedly said, "All right Nelson, to celebrate my victory over that damn epidemic, I hope you can first have your servants serve me a hearty and delicious breakfast, and then go inform my father of this good news." Nelson smiled and said, "Follow your orders." They followed the dim staircase to the lobby on the first floor of the castle, and Leon sat down at the rectangular dining table, waiting and surveying this familiar yet unfamiliar home. In the center of the hall hangs 3 wooden plaques resembling Irish shields, each with different badges painted on them. The combination of red and yellow stripes with 2 eagles represents the Otherville family of the Sicilian king, the green vertical stripes paired with male lions represent the Campbell family of Syracuse, the Bauhinia emblem on the far right represents the Tebele family itself. In this era, the homogenization of family emblems was severe, with the Roman Empire's eagle emblem, pearl jade, and almost half of kingdom emblems featuring elements such as eagles, vultures, and sea eagles. However, in reality, the vast majority of these kingdoms formed by the Germanic and Celtic peoples were not on par with the Roman 8 pillars. The Shenluo Empire, which evolved from the East Frankish kingdom in the north and was neither sacred nor Roman, further developed this shameless behavior to the extreme. 2 iron candlesticks are placed in front of the Huiji Yuandan, and iron chandeliers are hung above the head. The former is used for daily lighting, while the latter is only lit during banquets hosted by the Tebele family. Next to the cabinet, there is also a weapon rack with a javelin, shield, and long sword, symbolizing the owner's brave and noble status. Leon looked around and saw a servant carrying food walking in. The servant exclaimed with sincere excitement, "Thank God, I heard that you have overcome the epidemic. This is simply a miracle, and you must have received God's favor." Leon nodded and crossed his forehead, saying, "Thank you for God's grace." The servant placed the dining plate on a yellowed white tablecloth, with a knife inside, 2 pieces of white bread emitting a strong wheat aroma, a large bowl of vegetable soup, and a cooked apple, which was ample for a breakfast. But it is puzzling that in the Middle Ages, people believed that fruits could only be eaten after they were cooked, just like they did not drink boiling water. Slice the bread and put it into the mouth, pairing it with a vegetable broth, while Leon chewed on it. Although the so-called white bread that only the upper class could afford did not make Leon feel very delicious, the fact that during this period, the vast majority of people had to eat black bread mixed with stones and gravel, and even couldn't afford it, made them forget the modern sense of luxury and privilege. He is well aware that he must overcome many, many difficulties, and differences in dietary habits are just the most insignificant part of them. Quickly removing the food from the table, Leon stood up and walked to the castle gate. Nelson has already informed his father, and soon he will face the first test of his journey. It is necessary to maintain some personal habits in Lion, such as his habit of staring at his father when talking, his tone being aggressive, and appearing like a stubborn child, but in reality, he is a very gentle person at heart. He sympathizes with the common people and imprisons himself in order not to transmit diseases to his father and servants. He is indeed a very good person. Of course, there must be some in this that he doesn't trust those bird-billed doctors and has already fallen into despair and fear, just wanting to keep himself away from the crowd. People are complex, and to fully play Lion well, I must be careful enough. But while maintaining the original owner's habits, there is no need to overcorrect. It is normal for people to undergo changes after experiencing life and death. At this moment, Nelson hurriedly ran in and said, "Young master, if your body is recovering well, Lord Tebley will ask you to go to the square to meet him." "Okay, I'll go over now." Outside the castle is a manor surrounded by low city walls. Inside the manor, there are prayer rooms, blacksmiths, carpenters, stables, and animal sheds. If foreign enemies invade, even if the small towns outside are occupied by them, this place can still be defended for a considerable period of time. This is the significance of castles in this era. To be honest, the castle of the Tbilisi family was much more shabby than Leon had imagined. Compared to the magnificent castles of the Victorian era, it appeared much simpler and narrower, and it was also cramped and damp. If it weren't for the current rampant plague, the Tbilisi family should have lived on the estate. A castle is a defensive tool, so there will naturally be less consideration for comfort. Suddenly, a melodious bell rang from the distant town. The bells of this era have many meanings, whether it is weddings, funerals, weddings, invasions by foreign enemies, or gatherings, each with its own unique sound. He listened attentively for a moment before distinguishing that it was a gathering. Leon asked, "What's going on?" Nelson said, "It was the Lord who held a gathering in the square, about to judge a witch who used evil magic to bring us a disease." "Witches?" Nelson said, "Yes, we found the forbidden book from her house and threw her into the lake. She still floats and doesn't sink, which indicates that she has been protected by demons and is an evil witch." How could Leon not have known about the famous witch persecution movement in history, which was initiated by the Church and almost represented the darkest side of the Middle Ages? The witch-hunting movement persecuted over 100,000 innocent women. Many women are falsely accused of witches simply because of their beauty and jealousy, and ignorant people have no doubt about the Church's claim that witches are the source of the Black Death. As for whether there really exists a real witch, he used to think it was absurd, but now he can't be sure. After all, even demons exist, and having a witch is not unimaginable, right? With these thoughts in mind, Leon pretended to be casual and said, "She will be burned to death, won't she?" "That's right, other means cannot completely kill witches, only cremation can make their fallen souls fly to ashes." Leon frowned and said, "But who can prove that the plague was brought by the witches?" Nelson was stunned. He had never doubted this, but he had never thought about it. "My priests all say that as long as we burn those witches, the disease will stop, and our sins will be washed away." When he said these words, a trace of longing appeared on his face, and he had a saintly sense of mission, completely unaware of the cruelty involved. This did not prevent Leon from feeling a chilling sensation. He was very skeptical that if he showed any unusual behavior, since he was the heir of the Lord, once recognized by the Church as a demon-possessed wizard, he would instantly betray and leave the family. This ignorant, theological world that values cruelty as justice. He is out of place with everyone in this world. As he passed by the prayer room, the priest wearing a black sacrificial robe was silently praying. Inheriting Lion's memory, he realized that the priest had just held a funeral mass. Before he self-isolated, many people had already died in the small town of his territory. It can be foreseen that for a considerable period of time, the priest's ceremonial robe will be black. A deep prayer sounded. Lord, let us be far from evil. May you always grant us health and keep the plague far from us. Nelson gratefully said, Father Sean is praying again, and his piety will surely make God see and protect the Tebele family. Fighting the epidemic relies on praying to gods and worshipping Buddha. What are you joking about? Liang shook his head secretly. Before crossing the country, China was also experiencing a global epidemic. He had various common sense in his mind to resist the epidemic. However, if these common sense were proposed in this era, it would be no less than an impact on the authority of the church. Whether anyone believed it or not, even if someone believed it, the church's judicial office would immediately send knights to punish him. The church preaches every day that the Black Death was brought by witches, constantly conducting witch trials, but you are here to isolate and disinfect. What's going on? Do you think the church is wrong? End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Hell on Earth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Hell on Earth. The weather is foggy, and the castle and estate are located higher than the town, so standing here, you can vaguely see the outline of the town in the mist. Outside the town, there are strong smoke columns rising, like ancient beacon towers. Liang asked, what are they burning? Nelson's answer was concise. The body. Oh. Liang nodded. He silently said in his heart, burning corpses can also be understood. To avoid infection, and corpses are prone to decay in this weather, which may lead to other diseases. But a hint of gloom immediately cast over his heart. He had never seen a body before, except to mourn his relatives and friends. The two of them left the estate and walked along a muddy path with ruts and puddles. Soon, they arrived at the entrance of the small town. Looking at the scene of mournful Hong, he only felt that the whole world presented a grey illusion, like the silent ridge in a movie. The air was filled with the smell of corpses, and swarms of buzzing flies flew by. Liang instinctively covered his mouth and nose with the high collar of his hoodie, acting as a simple mask and also trying to isolate the pungent odor that permeated the air. The environment in the small town is far worse than Liang thought. On the streets and alleys, there were rows of corpses covered in rags, emitting a strong odor. Groups of withered and dirty mice darted rapidly on the corpses, with a pair of black and red feet stretched out on the roadside, being run over by the passing wheels countless times, presenting an indescribable appearance. At every moment, one can hear a heart-wrenching cough, as if the black dying patient was on the brink of death. The whole town is extremely quiet, with almost no conversation between people, even the crying is very faint, and death is coming at every moment. Liang worked hard to prevent himself from stepping on those corpses, but surprisingly, he had an illusion in his heart that he was in the midst of the end of the world. Has the epidemic become so severe? Yes, young master. Nelson also looked worried and said, more than half of the people in the town have already died from the Black Death. People stay at home and don't even want to go out to clean up the bodies. Liang's footsteps suddenly stopped. A young girl with unfocused eyes leaned against the wall, motionless. Her face turned a bit dark, but she still had a relatively delicate appearance. He waved his hand in front of her and immediately realized that she was dead, just not lying horizontally on the street like other corpses. Liang let out a sigh and whispered, when will these days come to an end? Nelson remained silent for a moment before saying, the Black Death is God's punishment, and it will only fade when he retracts it. With the power of humanity itself, it is impossible to eliminate the Black Death, so young master, you are a miracle. Young master, you shouldn't approach her. Liang nodded, although he had antibodies, the Witcher's hand also described that it was almost unlikely to get sick again, not absolutely. Living in such an environment, even if one is not close to the corpse, in order to avoid the Black Death, they may only be looking forward to the so-called herd immunity. A creaking sound sounded, a man wearing a black hood, resembling a mourner, pushed a wooden cart with two bodies covered in straw, but still revealing stiff hands and feet with black spots. "Your Excellency Lion." He lifted his head and drew a cross on his chest. Leon instinctively took a step back, because the person was wearing a crow mouthpiece like a plague doctor, and there was still a wisp of smoke rising from the iron pores, which looked like a monster at first glance. The mourner seemed, perhaps, to have smiled and then continued on. I could vaguely hear the small tune he was singing softly in his mouth. "My lover and I have wounds that have been lingering for ages. We fell in love too late, and now my lover and I are going to bury ourselves in peace." Wounds refer to abscesses on individuals suffering from the Black Death. Leon gradually quickened his pace, and this era was like the end of the world, where life had become worthless. Fortunately, he had resistance to the Black Death. Otherwise, in such hygienic conditions, he felt that his best way out was to escape to the depths of the deserted forest and die in the mouth of wild beasts. Guards wearing chain armor and hoodies were knocking on the door from door to door. "Lord, hold a meeting. We will judge the wicked witch. You should go and witness, only then can the plague come to an end." A strong cough came from inside the room, and the man with a turquoise face wrapped in a headscarf opened the door and said, "Okay, I'll go to the square right now." The guard looked at him and said, "Hey buddy, I need to take a look at you." The man trembled all over and stuttered, The guard inexplicably pressed his sword against his neck, lifted the scarf from a distance, and then saw swollen lymph nodes on his neck, forming a bulge, as if stung by a highly poisonous wasp. The guard shook his head and drew a cross on his forehead. "I'm sorry brother, you can't go to the gathering." "No, please." The man's lips trembled and he wanted to pray, but the guard immediately stabbed his heart with a short sword. Leon witnessed this scene with his own eyes, feeling a bit dizzy in his brain. Everything he had seen before made him feel like he had fallen to hell. He said expressionlessly, "Let's go, Nelson." The guard only then noticed this side and inserted the long sword back into its sheath, respectfully saying, "Young Master Lion, long time no see." Leon nodded perfunctorily to the first executioner he had seen in a foreign world, and then quickly walked along the cobblestone road towards the square. At this moment, the square was already crowded with people, coughing incessantly, and in the center of the square stood a burnt black cross. Under Nelson's leadership, Leon walked through the crowd and arrived at the innermost platform of the square. Before entering, I saw a brave and burly man standing there, staring at him with a surprised gaze. This was Lion's father, Baron Tebele. I saw him wearing a lock armor and a top, with curly brown short hair and sharp eyes like a wolf king on the grassland. "My son, I heard that you have overcome the terrifying Black Death. You are truly the pride of me and even the entire family," said Baron Tebele with a hearty smile. Leon responded confidently and said, "Everything is under the protection of God." It's strange that when it comes to facing the other person, he doesn't feel nervous anymore. At this moment, the crowd became restless. A woman was sandwiched between two guards and pushed under a burnt black cross. Her clothes were stripped naked, her body covered in scars, her long brown hair was like straw, and she had clearly experienced torture. They tied her hands around it, and an executioner wearing black leather armor smeared black mud onto her forehead, painting it as a crude cross. People immediately began to cheer. "Burn the witch to death. Her demon's accomplice, the plague was born from her, burned to death. As long as the sun rises and sets in the east and west, the witch must be burned to death." The woman known as the witch murmured in despair, her voice so weak and hoarse. "I have never hurt anyone. I just came across an ancient book by chance, please let me go. My father also died from the Black Death, and I hate it as much as you do. I am not a spreader of the disease." End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Curses. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Curses. But people's plea for this poor woman was only met with verbal abuse, and some men's faces were even filled with enthusiasm and excitement, as if watching a wonderful play. Leon looked at the poor woman with sympathy in his heart, but he did not rashly ask for mercy. Everything I see after entering the town proves that human life in this era is incredibly cheap. He just asked, "Father, is she really a witch?" Baron Tebele remained noncommittal and said, "It doesn't sink when thrown into the water, maybe it does." A strong sense of absurdity surged in Liang's heart. If it sinks, then it will die. Baron Tebele's method of identifying witches is to throw a woman alive into the water. If she sinks to the bottom, it proves that she is not a witch. If she floats, it means she has been protected by the devil. Baron Tebele seemed to see through Leon's voice and shook his head, saying, "It doesn't matter whether she's a witch anymore. You should know that we need to sit firmly in the position of lords, be cruel, kind, foolish, and wise. We are still nobles, but we must maintain something. The power of lords is granted by God, and deviating from God means deviating from ourselves." After thinking of something, he showed a rare concern and said, "Are you recovering well? If you feel uncomfortable, go back and rest first." Leon shook his head, hesitating for a moment before finally asking, "Can we stop this tragedy? Judging whether a woman is a witch based on the book The Hammer of Witches is absurd. I don't believe that the epidemic was brought about by witches, and killing her is also impossible to stop the disaster." Speaking this sentence was already a great adventure for Leon, but as a modern person, his conscience prevented him from anticipating the impending tragedy like the excited spectators around him. The Hammer of Witches is written by the monks of the Inquisition, indicating the characteristics of witches and how to interrogate and deal with them. Extracting one of them shows its absurdity. If she appears afraid during interrogation, then she is guilty, and her conscience exposes her shortcomings. If she insists on being innocent and remaining calm, then she is guilty because witches are accustomed to shamelessly lying. And all of these were found in Lion's memory, and he had the privilege of reading the full text of The Witch's Hammer. Baron Tebele shook his head and said, "Since the Black Death landed in Messina and swept through here, there have been 6 cases of women being framed as witches." He used the Latin word, framing. "I suppressed 5 obviously ridiculous and absurd accusations, which have already made Father Sean very dissatisfied." Speaking of which, a hint of anger flashed in Baron Tebele's sharp gaze, clearly dissatisfied with a clergyman's manipulation of him within his territory. This indicates that he understands everything, but he has no intention of stopping it. Liang had no choice but to look sympathetically at the poor woman tied to the cross. "Why don't you listen to my explanation?" The woman's expression is filled with despair and confusion. These people she used to be familiar with were now terrifyingly unfamiliar. Even her mother and young brother looked at her with disgust, hating her for bringing a plague that killed her father, and hating her for bringing shame to the family. "But what exactly did I do wrong? You all say I am a witch colluding with demons, but now I see you more like demons in hell. I hate you all." A faint murmur of the abyss echoed in her mind. "If God doesn't love you, then throw yourself into the embrace of demons. The abyss is your kingdom of heaven." Her eyes were completely devoid of light, only dimmed with a strong sense of despair and hatred, and she said by a stroke of fate, "Since God cannot save me, then I pray that the devil in hell can hear my prayer. I pray that you set foot on this land, devour everyone, sink their souls, and never ascend to heaven. I curse that all of you will become the devil's food. Since you call me a witch, then I will do what witches do." She shouted out with joy, although she didn't know if it meant anything. When she saw the expressions of fear and hatred on people's faces, she knew. It meant something. Ha ha ha. She laughed wildly, tearing apart her vocal cords, her hoarse voice like a crow waiting on a branch to rot. Fear infuriated the audience, who angrily spat at her, threw stones, and shouted, "Burn her to death! Burn her to death!" The executioner put on a hood, drew a cross on his forehead, and whispered, "May this poor soul be redeemed, Amen." Immediately, the torch was thrown out. Bang! The flames quickly ignited, but the woman did not let out a scream. She just repeated her curse over and over again until a tongue of fire erupted from her body, completely turning her whole body into charcoal. Leon stared at all of this, feeling his scalp tingling, his stomach spasming, and his desire to vomit reaching its peak, but he still held back. His nails dug into his flesh and repeatedly warned himself, "I have done my best." Lion's father is not a cover for the sky in his territory, and the clergy here also have great power. The executioner even burned the woman without consulting him. If I behave too differently, I will also be in danger. Only by surviving can I have the possibility to change this era. But the anger surging from within is still difficult to suppress. How can human life be like grass? What flavor? Baron Tebeli suddenly frowned. Leon suddenly realized that the faint burnt smell that had just filled his nasal cavity had been replaced by a strong smell of sulfur. Sharp laughter echoed from the flames. Following closely, a huge terrifying figure squeezed out from the burning crematorium. It has lead gray skin, and obesity causes excess fat to form wrinkles and hang down. It is about 2.5 meters tall, with a horizontal width of no less than 2 meters, and looks like a giant gray-skinned pig standing upright. It has 2 short and thick goat horns on its head, and deep blue hair covering its lower body, like pants. The devil is really here. It was the witch who summoned the demon. People panicked and fled in all directions. At the same time, in front of Leon appeared a yellow paper page with a hunter's hand, showing a picture book that depicted the identical appearance of a demon in front of him. Dwarf demons, low-level hellish demons, due to their ability to grow meat from anything they eat, are widely regarded as the prey of most demons. Hazard. D. Evaluation. A well-trained night team can easily eliminate foolish and brainless dwarf demons through holy water and silverware. Leon's brain froze for a moment, really a witch colluding with demons. She wasn't wronged. But just as this thought flashed, the rationality in the mind was replaced by a frenzy of appetite. Hunt it. No, how can this work? Leon felt like he might have gone crazy, relying solely on himself. Why hunt down a real demon? He struggled to suppress the instincts that emerged within his body, trembling violently, no different from those who were terrified by witnessing demons. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Monster Hunting. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Monster Hunting. But he still couldn't control his gaze from focusing on the sudden appearance of the demon, and his brain was rapidly running, trying to develop a feasible hunting plan. This is completely a subconscious behavior, just like a young tiger seeing an adult wild boar. Even if its strength is vastly different, it will still subconsciously think about how to hunt and kill the other party. Because it is natural for tigers to eat wild boars. It hasn't moved since being summoned by the witch, even the executioner closest to it was released by it. This indicates that this demon seems to be bound by some intangible force, and its body is actually floating, which further proves this. After all, it is somewhat unreasonable if even a lowly dwarf demon can float. It should be feasible to attack now, but the opponent's defense looks very high. What's more important is that I didn't wear any weapons when I came here. Just as I thought of this, I heard a crisp sound like glass being shattered. The demon's body suspended in the air suddenly loosened, and its heavy body fell with a loud bang onto the wooden platform where the cremation was carried out, leaving 2 large pits. Yes, the opportunity is fleeting. The wooden platform made of solid wood couldn't restrain it at all. With just a little force, its sturdy legs tore the platform apart. Leon's expression froze as he realized that this was not a power beyond human reach. Is this still the lowest level dwarf demon? Is this demon hunter still human? He was even unable to roast that the devil who looked neither short nor bad would be marked with such a name by the devil map. However, the demon that is treated as prey is so powerful that the demon hunters must have extremely powerful power to hunt it down. What kind of power can my talent bring me to plunder? Thinking of this, his heart felt like a fire had been ignited, completely devoid of his usual calmness and composure. At this moment, the beast he had imprisoned in his heart for over 20 years, named, yearning for adventure and excitement, was released by him with his own hands. He turned his gaze to the highest point in the square, where the gallows still hung the body of a robber after breaking free from his shackles. The dwarf demon did not immediately pursue the fleeing crowd. Instead, he turned his gaze to Baron Tebele, Nelson, and some guards who were still closer in the square. Perhaps it was because of its stupidity that it gave up on better prey and chose people with obvious defensive abilities such as Baron Tebele as its prey. Its eyes are very small, squeezed in the fat folds of its face, like a black bean filled with evil and greed, without any sense of innocence, only making people feel ugly and ferocious. As it walked towards them, Baron Tebele's face showed no signs of panic. He calmly drew his sword and said to Leon, "Get out of here." Then he shouted loudly, "Guards, come to my side." Nelson, immediately inform Father Sean of everything that has happened here. Elvin, prepare for battle. The knight in armor replied loudly, "Yes, Your Excellency Tiberi." Elvin was the chief knight of Baron Tebele and the only knight who often accompanied him. He had exceptional martial arts skills and was said to have reached the final of a martial arts competition in the Kingdom of Sicily. Even the then regent, Queen William I, wanted to recruit him, and no one knew why he ultimately chose to join a baron's army. As a lord, the main combat force under his command is not actually very well prepared, but rather his knightly lords who are enfeoffed in various territories. Only these knights have enough time and energy to hone their martial arts from a young age, and they wear their own armor and weapons, with a level of sharpness far beyond that of urban guards. In this era of warfare, the role of infantry has been greatly weakened compared to the Roman Empire, and cavalry has become a truly decisive force. The guards, wielding long swords, round shields, and spears, quickly gathered over, but facing the legendary monster, everyone felt uneasy. Anyone who fights against the devil will ascend to heaven after death. Those who fear the enemy but do not follow the former will be punished according to military law. After death, they will be abandoned by the gods and thrown into the abyss. Baron Tebele waved his arms and shouted, his long sword pointing straight at the demon. Under his encouragement, the guards finally mustered a little courage and formed in formation to approach the dwarf demon. The elven knight drew his long bow from behind and accurately hit the dwarf demon's eye with one arrow. The dwarf demon felt pain and a large stream of dark green blood flowed out of his eye, roaring wildly towards him. He repeated his old trick, but as the next arrow was shot, the dwarf demon closed his eyes and the fat on his eyelids suddenly drooped. The arrow had already shot hastily and inaccurately, and even on that layer of fat, no blood flowed out. In just a few short breaths, the dwarf demon had already charged towards the formation, forcefully throwing two soldiers into the air, spitting blood and flying through the formation. It punched Elvin with a punch, and the chief knight Elvin blocked its fist with a kite shield. The whole person was immediately thrown out like a shell. Don't forcefully touch it. After only a brief encounter with Baron Tebele, he keenly realized that this dwarf demon was like a war elephant tamed by the Moors on the North African battlefield. Perhaps sluggishness, clumsiness, and mindlessness are its fatal weaknesses, but it came too suddenly. The vast majority of guards did not receive professional training, and even did not carry long weapons. Such a monster is almost invincible on such a battlefield. He shouted loudly, "Bring the fire pot, crossbow and arrow." It has great strength, but it is also very bulky. As long as it doesn't run in a straight line, it can't catch up with us. Elvin struggled to stand up, feeling excruciating pain all over his body and a strong sense of defeat rising in his heart. His proud martial arts skills were useless against this monster. Under the command of Baron Tebele, the guards no longer formed formations to confront the dwarf demon, but dispersed and engaged in a wolf-hunting tactic, surrounding the dwarf demon and engaging in guerrilla warfare. Damn it, this monster's skin is too thick. Weapons can indeed penetrate the skin of dwarf demons, but their wounds after being cut open will not bleed at all, only revealing the disgusting white fat, which does not affect their movements at all. It's okay, as long as we keep going, victory will belong to us sooner or later, Baron Tebeli shouted with encouragement. Gradually, the scars on the surface of the dwarf demon's body grew more and more, and its movements gradually slowed down. After failing to pounce on a guard, it roared wildly, "Taros will eat you insects." This is devil's language. Liang was somewhat surprised. This should not have been the language he had mastered, but now he could hear it clearly. Does it mean that the hunter's hand Jia still has the ability to translate? What is that? Quickly dodge. Baron Tebeli roared loudly. I saw a thick, pale green liquid gushing out from the wound on the dwarf demon's body, and then it took a deep breath, causing its body to shrink in a circle. Affected by the tight skin, countless green mucus suddenly flew out like bullets, landing on the soldiers, and even the helmet armor quickly emitted white smoke. Screams of agony echoed one after another. Taking advantage of this chaotic momentum, the dwarf demon rushed out frantically, picked up a guard, and in his screams, directly ripped off his head. It chewed while tightly gripping the soldier's body with both hands, directly squeezing the person's body flat. Blood and water mixed with colorful organs burst out of its body cavity and fell into its bloody mouth. And its originally dry and shriveled skin has once again filled up, and the scars on its body surface are starting to heal at a visible speed to the naked eye. Oh my goodness, Bill was eaten by him. Damn it, it's recovering. We can't kill him at all. The guards were greatly discouraged by this cruel scene and retreated one after another. Just then, a figure jumped down from a high place like a big bird. At some point, Liang had already grabbed a long sword and climbed up from the gallows at the highest point in the square. At this moment, Liang held a knight's sword and descended from the sky, accurately piercing the blade through the head of the dwarf demon until it reached the hilt. And the cost was that Lion's sword-wielding hands were almost dislocated by the falling force, and he was also hanging from the sword. Looking at him, he almost pierced his demon horns and couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. I swear I've never done such a risky thing in my life. The huge, short, demon's movement froze and then fell to the ground with a loud roar. Its defense was not high, but its thick skin-fat layer gave people an illusion of being invincible, making you cut me 30 centimeters without breaking through the fat layer. Isn't it invincible? Liang should have been afraid at this moment, but he found that there was no sense of fear in his heart, and instead, a feeling of heartfelt pleasure arose. The hunter magic hand Jia reappeared and a new page appeared. You have successfully completed the hunting of the dwarf demon, and will draw one of their talents as the cornerstone of your strength. What are the talents of dwarf demons? Isn't it just about being able to eat and eat anything that will produce meat? Liang's heart was slightly hot and cold, just the lowest level dwarf demon. It's better not to have too much expectation. But soon, a huge force was transmitted from the corpse under his feet. It was an extremely chaotic and evil energy. As soon as it entered his body, it was like boiling flames, burning all the way and rushing into his organs. A line of blood characters emerged from the demon hunter's hand. Predatory talent. The power of dwarf demons. E.level, you have gained power beyond ordinary people, but this is only a small part of the true power talent of a dwarf demon. You need to hunt more dwarf demons to upgrade your talent until it is promoted. This talent can be promoted up to the level of dwarf demon's commanding power, C.level. You have unlocked the creation interface, completed the hunting mission, and unlocked the items required for casting and sacrificing formulas to obtain finished products. You have unlocked an exclusive artifact mission. Kill a abyssal lord with a crown of ashes, sacrifice his soul, and you will receive the great legendary sword. Flame of the Condor. Quasi-artifact. Yi Yen, the souls of all demons you have killed will be taken away by them, forever burned by the flames of karma, and their pain will become the source of the power of this weapon. This weapon has no fixed shape, is bound to the soul, is indelible, and will never be lost. A quasi-artifact. There was a hint of warmth in Leon's eyes, but it quickly subsided. Even if he thought with his toes, he could conclude that this thing was just a pie in the pan, although now it looks really tempting. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Unbelievers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Unbelievers, what kind of ashes crown, abyss lord, quasi-artifact, such a towering thing is too far away from me. He stood up and wiped off the white fat from the dwarf demon's body. The feeling of sticking to the dwarf demon just now was like lying on a large worm. The terrible feel that can be described as plump or soft makes people never want to stay on it for a moment. He pulled out the long sword that pierced through the skull of the dwarf demon again. It was very easy, his strength was much stronger than before, and he still needed to try to figure out how much he needed. However, beating someone to death with bare hands should be stable. As for the long sword, it was corroded to a point where it was clearly scrapped. The corrosive nature of the dwarf demon's body fluids was comparable to that of strong acid. He did these things on his own and only then realized that there was a complete silence around him. He looked up and met everyone's widened eyes, which made him feel a bit nervous. It's broken, I wouldn't have acted too far, would I? Someone drew a cross on their forehead and whispered, Lord, what did I see? You're not mistaken, it was Little Lion who killed this demon. At this moment, Nelson, who had just run to the estate to call someone, hurriedly rode a Lusitanian warhorse and happened to encounter this scene, exclaiming, Young Master Lion. It was young Master Lion who killed this demon. He is our hero. Nelson's lips trembled as he squeezed out a few words after a while. This is simply a miracle. For most people during this period, Lion just did not appear in public. His illness from the Black Death remains a secret, as an extinct lord will inevitably cause emotional turmoil. For others, Lion's killing of a demon can only be said to be shocking, but for those like Nelson who are well aware of the situation, it is even more like a miracle. Who can say that miraculously breaking free from the Black Death and then personally killing a cruel demon is not a miracle? People rushed over regardless of the foul-smelling corpses. Lion, well done. Your achievements are enough for Lord to trim off your tail and grant you the true knighthood title. Lion, your courage and wisdom are amazing. Lion, you actually killed a real demon. This is a great achievement that none of us have ever achieved. Your name will surely resound throughout Sicily. No, not only Sicily, but even those noble girls in Italy will crazily beg for your love, because you are a true warrior. Baron Tebele walked over with a contented expression on his face, and he smiled, All right, Lion must be very tired now, so don't surround him. He stood aside the crowd and arrived in front of Leon. He first said to the soldiers, The souls of those who died in battle will return to heaven. The compensation will be distributed to the deceased's relatives on time, and each of the other participants will be rewarded. He patted Leon's shoulder again and instructed someone to dispose of the dead body before returning to the estate with Leon. The two of them were walking on the road, and their intuition told Baron Leonardo that something was wrong. Just as they were worried about whether their behavior was too suspicious, Baron Rebellion said, Well done. He said with some relief, I had never known before that my young only son had grown to this extent. Leon didn't know how to respond for a moment, so he simply said, It's all thanks to God's blessing. Just attribute some things that are not easy to explain to the Lord, maybe you can still be a saint yourself. The influence of the church is so terrifying, following the principle of joining if you can't beat it. Even if there is dirt and grime hidden inside, it cannot change the fact that it is easy to enjoy the shade under the big tree. To survive in this era, one must abide by the rules of this era. Perhaps. But he didn't expect Baron Tbilisi to be somewhat skeptical about Leon's answer. He said lightly, If God really has grace, he won't let human diseases run rampant. Leon, you must firmly believe that you overcame diseases with your own strength, and also with courage and wisdom, you overcame demons. Leon's sense of doubt grew stronger in his heart. Previously, Baron Tebeli's view on the execution of witches was not like that of a devout aristocrat. But it cannot be denied that Baron Tebeli's words were very appealing to Leon. He believed that man can conquer nature, and that gentlemen should strive for self-improvement rather than relying on praying to gods and worshipping Buddha to fight against the epidemic. Over the years, I have neglected to care for you and focused too much energy on my territory. I only ask you to practice martial arts, learn culture and etiquette, hoping that you will become an outstanding knight and a future baron. But it wasn't until you were plagued by an epidemic that I realized your importance to me. But my father was not born to be a father, so please understand him more. You don't have to say that. Leon shook his head quickly. I didn't blame you. Perhaps Lion has it. He silently added in his heart. In my memory, this baron rarely met Lion since he was young, and even if he did, he was very serious and demanding. In short, Lion had never experienced his father's warmth in this father, but rather a fervent desire for his son to succeed. But I didn't expect to experience it first. Leon felt self-deprecating and also felt a bit guilty. He asked, Father, when will the Black Death leave us? Baron Tebeli said with a hint of mockery, I don't know, maybe it will be the day when God calms his anger. Can't we do anything on our own, besides praying to God to calm down? As a modern person, Leon certainly understands the various basic measures needed to deal with infectious diseases, but he should not know. In this medieval era where the Vatican was supreme, if he dared to propose some modern medical methods to combat the epidemic, the outcome would be either a trial by the court or a cremation stand in the center of the town. Perhaps there really is. Baron Tebeli pondered for a long time, seeming hesitant, and walked out of the town before speaking up, Go to the witch's forest, my son. There is a reclusive lady there, her name is Angelina, indicating your identity. She may be able to help us. The witch forest. Leon widened his eyes. Legend has it that there lived an evil witch in the great forest south of the Tbilisi territory. She used witchcraft to isolate the entire forest from the world, and any intruder would unconsciously walk out in a circle. Over time, people called that forest the witch's forest. Isn't that a restricted area? Leon exclaimed in surprise, Is Ms. Angelina, as you mentioned, a witch? Having witnessed the magical power of witches, Leon no longer regarded the theory of witches as baseless. Baron Tebeli shook his head with a hint of warmth in his expression. He smiled and said, No, she's just an ordinary woman who has studied black magic and is very kind. I think at the very least, she should be friendly enough to you. Looking at his gaze, Leon seriously doubted the relationship between this witch and him. Is it a mistress or something like that? Father, are you with the witch? Leon did not conceal his doubts. Baron Tiberius said, All right, Leon, listen to me. I don't really believe in the church as much as people think. Our ancestors of the Tiberius family were not Normans commanded by the conqueror Roger. He followed General Berisaliu to conquer North Africa and Italy, and was appointed as the governor of the Sicilian military region by Emperor Justinian. Sicily should have belonged to us, it was the Normans who stole this beautiful land from us. We used to believe in the Greek Orthodox Church, Roman Orthodox Church, instead of the barbaric Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church, and hunting so-called witches seemed so barbaric and cruel to me, but I couldn't stop it. This place is so close to Rome, and I can't take such a risk. And now, I have become an unbeliever, facing a disaster, praying for the blessings of the gods has no meaning. During your illness, I prayed countless times, until yesterday when I stepped on the cross in a fit of anger and declared that I will no longer have any faith from then on. Nelson just told me that your condition began to decline from then on. Leon didn't know how to respond for a moment. Was it just a coincidence? My brain quickly ran, and after a moment, I replied, Father, I can't shake my beliefs over the years. Your words have left me deeply moved. I will think carefully when I go back, but regardless of whether faith is meaningful or not, even if it is superficial in such an era, we still need to maintain faith. Baron Tebele felt guilty and said, "Don't worry, I know more than you do, otherwise I wouldn't have sacrificed that poor girl." Liang asked in confusion, "Sacrifice? Do you mean she's not a real witch? But she summoned a demon." Baron Tebele shook his head and said, "So what if she's a witch? If we don't treat her like this, she won't choose to retaliate against us in this way. Why do we still need to do this?" Seemingly seeing through Leon's doubts, Baron Tebele smiled and said, "Don't think so much, these things have nothing to do with you. Let Nelson pack your luggage for you and leave tomorrow morning. To be honest, if it weren't for you personally killing a demon today and achieving a feat that even a true knight could not have imagined, I wouldn't have thought that my little Leon could have taken on such a heavy responsibility. Father, won't you go back to the estate?" He rubbed his brow and said with a hint of fatigue, "No, this has happened. There are still many things waiting for me to handle in the territory." End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Crossbow and Arrow. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Crossbow and Arrow. Baron Tebele walked on a muddy road, and the town was filled with people rushing to escape. He didn't stop him, just silently watched. "In this world, where is stronger than where?" He suddenly said, "Alvin, come out." In the streets and alleys behind him, knights dressed in neat chain armor slowly walked out. Chief Knight Elvin looked at the man who had once stood out with him in the kingdom competition and frowned. "Connor, have you really decided to let Lion find that lady?" Connor is the name of Baron Tebele. Not surprised by Elvin eavesdropping on what he had just said, Baron Tbilisi nodded and said, "Yes, I should have let him accompany his mother long ago. The Black Death almost took away my son." He paused for a moment and then added, "After this incident, I have come to understand that reviving the Tebele family and reclaiming Sicily is not as good as living well as him." Elvin fell silent for a moment and said in a deep voice, "But would Lion be willing to stay in that forest forever?" Baron Tebele smiled and said, "Whether he wants it or not, I don't think Angelina will let him go. She can understand what I mean." Elvin's tone became somewhat unpleasant. "So what do you plan to do? As an extinct lord, give up territory, sell assets, and then return to Constantinople to become a wealthy man?" Baron Tebele shook his head and said, "Of course not. I've devoted half of my life here, how can I give up here?" Elvin sneered and said, "Connor, actually reclaiming Sicily and revitalizing the Tebele family is not that important to you, is it?" Baron Tebele grabbed Elvin's shoulder and frowned, "Of course not, my brother. How could you think that?" Elvin snorted coldly, "If you really value these things so much, why did you refuse when the lady said she would help you back then?" "She's a witch," Baron Tebele said vaguely. "Well, you know, that's too risky. I was considering it for you." Elvin laughed back angrily and said, "Who is at greater risk?" "Of course it's for us." Elvin said coldly, "How could it be possible to achieve great things without risks? Have we ever experienced fewer risks? Are you afraid of the risks that lady bears?" Baron Tebele remained silent for a long time before bitterly smiling and saying, "Yes, she enjoys a long life, a carefree and isolated life. How can I bear to drag her into the secular world?" "I should have known earlier," Elvin said angrily, "but that lady has such great power, who could have hurt him?" Tebele sighed and said, "Witches' non-interference in the secular world is a customary rule between them and the church. Once violated, there will inevitably be retribution." "You really sound like a gypsy prodigy. How did I believe your nonsense before giving up on the Empress Dowager's recruitment?" Baron Tebele spread out his hand and said, "You should be grateful, otherwise you would have been implicated in the anti-revolutionary campaign 2 years ago. At least you're still alive with me." Elvin snorted coldly, "It's better than staying in the countryside forever and being an unknown chief knight." Baron Tebele Anfu said, "All right, my closest brother, believe me, we will succeed. Just take advantage of the disaster of the Black Death, and we will grow stronger. In the future, our names will resound throughout the world of God, just like Richard the Lionheart." Elvin let out a long sigh and said, "You always say that, but when will the future be? I already feel that my martial arts skills are starting to decline. We are already 40 years old. Isn't it necessary for you to deceive me again when I can't lift the sword?" He smiled and said, "Rest assured, my brother. Believe me, the future is not long away. Let's go and comfort those frightened lambs with me." Upon returning to the estate, Leon immediately chose to return to his dark room. He took out his Pokémon spear and opened the newly unlocked casting page. At this moment, there were only 2 casting formulas on top, one of which was still the visible and intangible, quasi-divine artifact. Ye Flame. That is to say, currently the casting page only provides him with one casting formula. The Demon Breaking Arrow. Breaking Magic Arrow. Provides a 200% damage bonus to any supernatural creature and doubles the damage bonus to dark creatures. Required materials: Blood of Dwarf Demon, Iron Mine, and Bone Dust of the Dead. Daily synthesis limit: 10 killing 10 demons will unlock a new casting formula and open up advanced casting formulas for demon breaking arrows, armor breaking arrows, burst arrows, and spirit eliminating arrows. It's quite something, but I still lack a bow and arrow, and in my memory, the archery of the original owner Lion is really lackluster. Western knights, unlike the knights of the Byzantine Empire, have always despised archery and considered it an unsightly weapon. Knights like Elvin with superb archery are actually a minority. By the way, this is just an arrow. Why not ask Nelson for a crossbow for self-defense? The arrows of crossbows and bows should be interchangeable, right? Thinking of this, Leon left the room and arrived at the estate outside the castle. There are specialized carpentry workshops and blacksmiths in the estate, and even if there are no suitable crossbows stored in the castle, craftsmen can be hired to renovate them. Pope Innocent II once convened a meeting and issued the 29th decree, prohibiting the use of crossbows against Christians, but unfortunately, not many people followed this unreliable decree. However, knights do rarely use crossbows as a supplement to long-range output, and Lion is no exception. However, compared to difficult-to-learn bows, crossbows are much simpler. In the end, he chose a one-handed crossbow. Although the range was limited, the advantage was that it was easy to carry and he couldn't shoot even from a distance. So for a whole day, he spent familiarizing himself with the weapons and equipment of the past, practicing archery with a crossbow machine. It is worth mentioning that he also begged some dwarf demons for their corrosive green blood and the so-called bone dust of the deceased, which is also known as ashes. He dare not ask for too much quantity, just enough to synthesize 10 arrows. Because it could be seen as his attempt to gain the power of demons through evil rituals. Even though in fact he has already gained it. At night, people rest very early. Candles are still a luxury item in this era, and there are no torches lit in the corridor. The entire castle is eerily quiet, with only the faint movements of the night watchman passing by occasionally. Lying in bed, Leon couldn't sleep as he lay on his arms, gazing at the bright moon outside the window. "Dad, Mom, I'm in another world now." It is said that the moon symbolizes homesickness, and there is a famous saying that goes down from generation to generation. We share the beauty of 1,000 miles together. However, how far away are we from our hometown at this moment? That's not just the distance in space, but perhaps there's more time. Although the moon now looks no different from before, if it is really the same world, why haven't there been any demon fossils left in later generations? How did these supernatural things mysteriously disappear? I don't know how my body used to be, whether it's missing or becoming a vegetative, but I hope you all know that I've actually traveled through time and I'm doing well. You don't have to worry. Although I know it's impossible, Leon remembered the morning before his travels, when he tied his tie and hurriedly went out without even having breakfast made by his mother. It seems that the chatter of parents before leaving still lingers in my ears. Everything that was originally plain and even annoying now makes me feel sour. Yesterday's events appeared before my eyes, clearly remembered, but I can never go back. People always cherish things only when they lose them, but when they have them, they despise them in every way. Hey, you're not cheap. He tried hard to eliminate his chaotic thoughts, trying to put himself to sleep, but in despair, he realized that his current mental state was terrifying. The hunting of the dwarf demon seemed to bring it not only physical reinforcement, but also a better mental state than usual. He tossed and turned for a long time, and for no reason, he remembered the days when he lived in an 8-person dormitory in high school. It was before the college entrance examination, it was midsummer, and the cool seats were scorching hot with scorching heat. The whole room could only hear the buzzing sound of old ceiling fans. He suffered from insomnia time and time again during that period, and at that time, his biggest challenge in life was the college entrance examination. Afterwards, this challenge became life. Until now, he has become a demon again. Am I too difficult? End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Which Forest? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Which Forest? Leon stayed up all night like this. He is not someone who particularly recognizes the bed. Although the damp bedding and stuffy environment make him feel oppressed, it ultimately boils down to the fact that when the word time travel really happens to him, it is somewhat difficult to accept. This means that he will say goodbye to the past 20 years. His previous efforts, yesterday's struggles, and daily thoughts, even thinking about food, have all become futile. He needs time to say goodbye to the past. Just crossing over, one can fall asleep soundly, either heartless or with a heart so strong that it becomes abnormal. After staying up all night, of course, he would wake up very early the next day. Facing the first ray of dawn, he arrived at the top of the castle's high platform. From here, you can see your destination today, the forest known as the Witch's Forest. No one knows how big that forest is. Even if it goes further south, it will soon reach the coast. In theory, even if it is covered by forests from here to the coast, the Witch's Forest will not be very large. However, at first glance, everyone will still subconsciously feel that this is a deep forest sea that no one can walk out of. It seems like this is a secret realm independent of the world, or simply linked to the southern island of Malta. After breakfast, Leon packed his luggage and neatly wore the crossbow machine, demonic crossbow and arrow, one-handed sword, and opening axe. Due to the need to move forward in the forest, he did not wear chain armor, but instead chose to go light in battle. In fact, the climate here also meant that people were not accustomed to wearing layers of heavy armor for combat. His departure is still secretive, and Baron Tebele will not let his people know that he is planning to pray for the help of the witch. When Leon arrived at the edge of this forest, he turned around and could vaguely see the high platform at the top of the castle, with Baron Tebele nodding slightly to him. Leon waved his hand to him and then turned around to leave. This great forest, known as the Witch's Forest, is far larger than he had thought before. Being here feels like entering the kingdom of giants, with towering trees everywhere and thorns on the way, as if deliberately blocking outsiders from entering. He made an effort to carve out a barely advancing path with an axe, but the progress was slow, which consumed most of his physical strength. Fortunately, his strength and endurance were transformed by drawing the power of the dwarf demon, and he was still able to persevere. I have been walking for about an hour now. He lifted his head and tried to see the sun above him through the dense foliage. I need to rest now, I must have some extra strength, otherwise once faced with danger, I will find it difficult to even run. Just as he was about to clear an open space to rest, his feet seemed to be entangled by vines and he pulled several times without moving. Leon was about to bend down to examine when a warning suddenly sounded in his heart. At the same time, a cold touch rose in his neck, and that sharp feeling made him have no doubt that if he had any unusual movements, he would be pierced by a sharp object in his neck. He quickly raised his hand in surrender. A cold female voice sounded, "Outsiders are not welcome here." Does it sound like someone from the Witch's Forest? According to Baron Tebele's attitude, it's just his own person. Leon let out a slight sigh of relief and said, I am Leon, the son of Baron Tebele. I am here to find a lady named Angelina. Upon hearing this name, the enemy's hostility seemed to have slightly subsided. She said, How did you bypass the protective spell and walk in? Leon was surprised and said, What protective spell? I walked in easily and didn't encounter the spell you said. The female voice was also surprised and whispered, there was no response to the lie detection. What he said was actually true, and that's right. There is no sign of him practicing witchcraft. She walked around to Leon, her deep blue eyes like an endless sea, staring coldly at him. She is a pretty girl, dressed in a linen hooded cloak, with a hood covering her graceful curves. She looks like a forest ranger. She said, Don't play tricks. There's my sharp wooden spike behind your neck. As long as I think about it, you'll be separated, okay? Leon quickly nodded. She walked around to his face, still feeling a cold touch around his neck. It was only then that he realized he was not being pointed at by a sword, but rather something called a sharp wood spike. Is it witchcraft? He thought to himself. Her clear and cold voice rang out again, Since you have passed the protective spell, you have preliminarily obtained the qualification to meet my teacher, but the premise is that I need to confirm whether you have carried any external evil. She reached out her scallion white fingers and lifted his clothes open. Seeing the already healed wound, she was stunned for a moment. It is worth mentioning here that due to the warm climate in Sicily all year round, it is still summer now. Although Leon wore a cover-up on the outside, the inside looked very much like modern shoulder-less short sleeves. She couldn't help but wonder, have you ever been sick? Anglian hurriedly said, Yes, but I have already recovered. She widened her eyes and said, You're really lucky. I can't believe it. The Black Death is a terrifying disease that even witchcraft cannot cure. Quan Lai Tian, just as he was about to express gratitude to God, Leon realized that he might be facing a witch hunted by the church. He quickly changed his mind and said, It's just luck. She nodded, seemingly in agreement with the saying, Good luck. Well, even if you have recovered, it doesn't mean you won't bring the plague into the forest. Are witches also afraid of epidemics? This is not fantastical enough, and when she just said, the Black Death is a terrifying disease that cannot be cured by witchcraft, doesn't it mean that Baron Tbilisi has made it futile to seek help from witches? Forget it, let it be as it comes. Even if she wanted to turn back directly now, the witch lady probably wouldn't agree. He asked, So what should I do? You come with me. The forest seemed to have been deserted for a long time, covered in thorns and not even animal paths. However, as the girl moved forward, the thorny shrubs began to retreat to both sides, and as they passed, they quickly closed again. This is simply magic. No, it's a big druid. He revealed an undisguised surprised expression and said in his heart. They walked for a long time, and the sound of rushing water began to faint. The deeper you go, the louder the sound of flowing water hitting the stones, and fresh water vapor comes rushing towards you. As soon as it bypassed a towering ancient tree ahead, a wide lake suddenly appeared. Under the sunshine, this lake shimmers with enchanting radiance, and even the colorful rainbow can be faintly seen at the waterfall that falls between the top rocks. This is like a fairyland described in fantasy novels. He couldn't help but mutter to himself. There should be a goddess hidden in the lake, and as soon as I arrived I would give him a divine sword, which is in line with the routine of fantasy novels. It's hard to imagine that there is still such a beautiful and magnificent lake hidden deep in this dense forest. Go take a shower, and your clothes all need to be washed once. I know you Christians have some inexplicable rules, but in this forest, if you want to see a teacher, you must follow our rules. She hugged her chest with both hands and said in a cold voice. Okay. Leon agreed very decisively, without even pretending to hesitate. In fact, when he first saw this lake, he wished he could immediately immerse himself in it and have a good swim. Just, don't you avoid it for a moment. Oh, why should I avoid it? This forest belongs to us. But I am a man and you are a woman. So what? Liang felt speechless. Does this girl live in the big forest all her life, so she doesn't have any understanding of the difference between men and women? How did she know about the Black Death outside? End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Legendary Creatures. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Legendary Creatures. Forget it, if you're willing to keep an eye on it, I'm not at a disadvantage anyway. Although his mouth was tough, he still waited until the water reached his waist before starting to take off his clothes. Lion was originally not good at water, he did know a bit, but as a northerner, he was only limited to a few laps in the swimming pool. So the act of undressing in the water appears very clumsy, as one accidentally stumbles and falls into the water, choking on a mouthful of water. Cough. A silver bell-like laughter rang, and the little witch mocked, I heard you say you are also the son of a secular lord. Why are you so clumsy? It should be said that ordinary people are indeed very stupid. Liang is not angry either. As someone who has worked hard in society, he is very clear about the words, situation is stronger than people. Even if the little witch points at him and curses loudly now, he will not care, let alone just a casual mockery, and it may not be malicious. He cleaned himself very carefully, and after finishing, he also went to a place near the waterfall to fill the water bag. This lake is a freshwater lake with good water quality. In some medieval places, people believed that water was impure and drinking it directly made them susceptible to illness, which is correct because they did not drink boiled water. They use alcoholic beverages such as wine and malt instead of drinking water. But in Sicily, there is no such custom. People will drink water from clean wells or clear rivers, but of course, they do not drink hot water either. It's uncomfortable to wrap wet clothes around your body, but it's always better than running naked. He stood in the water, washed the cover of his coat, draped it over his shoulder, and said to the little witch, I'm fine. Okay, now I can take you to find the teacher. The girl showed a meaningful smile. Liang was about to agree when he felt a surge of hair on his back. When he looked down, he saw a large shadow rapidly expanding under his body. Sleeping slot. Perhaps others only perceive this as a meaningless exclamation of surprise, completely unaware of the multi-layered meaning represented by the Chinese classic national curse. Bang, a huge and ferocious head burst out of the water. It has a pair of sharp horns on its head, and its slender snake-like neck is covered with thorny and sharp protrusions, similar to the spiny-backed dragon of the Jurassic period. He almost used both hands and feet, trying to run towards the shore, but was immediately pushed up by the head. He hugged the horn on top of the spiny-backed dragon's head, worried that it would throw it down and swallow it in one gulp like eating a fish. Help! Help! It's embarrassing, but there's really no way. Liang, who had just hunted down a dwarf demon, did not possess extraordinary strength. At this moment, facing this legendary monster, besides calling for help, he probably only had to grab the ground with his head, hoping to quickly commit suicide. Unexpectedly, the little witch didn't panic and just reached out her hand, saying, Don't worry, Wenchi is a young Sicilian spiny-backed dragon with a gentle temper and won't easily harm anyone. I saw the spiny-backed dragon rubbing its slightly ferocious head against the little witch's palm. Okay, it's indeed very gentle. Leon calmed down slightly and was replaced by a strong sense of novelty. He whispered, Is it your pet? No, it's my good friend and also works part-time as a ferryman, taking us in and out of the witch's secret realm. She easily jumped up and stood with Leon on the neck of the Spinosaurus. The little witch said to herself, Are you surprised that there are still many magical creatures surviving in this world, just far away from the human population? I'm really surprised. Liang's heart was still beating, which scared him quite a bit. Suddenly swaying beneath her feet, Dragon Wenchi began to swim towards the center of the lake. The little witch saw his pale face and comforted him again, "Don't be too afraid. When she thinks you're pretty good, so you probably don't have any bad intentions. As long as you don't have any bad intentions, the worst outcome will be cleared by the teacher and the memories of this period will be sent out." Leon nodded and silently wrote in his heart, "So the witch is a kind and orderly camp." The little witch asked, "But how did you know the teacher's name?" "She hasn't left this forest for a long time." "From my father." "Your father? Is that the Baron Tbilisi you mentioned before?" She hesitated for a moment and exclaimed in surprise, "How could a secular lord know the name of a teacher?" Leon shook his head and said, "My father didn't explain these things to me, he just said that Ms. Angelina can help us avoid the invasion of the epidemic." "Wait, what was your name when you told me before?" "My name is Lion." "Which lion? Spell it with Greek words." Leon spelled it out according to his words. She asked again, "How old are you this year?" 23 years old. The little witch's expression gradually became more complex. "I understand why you can bypass the protective spell, Lion. If I say you belong to this forest, do you believe me?" Leon was not surprised. To be honest, it would only be surprising if there was nothing worth gossiping about between the old baron and the witch forest. So he continued to nod. The little witch praised his composure and then said, "I may be your sister. My name is Legia, and I don't have a surname. Of course, I may also have the same surname as you." Leon was stunned and thought to himself, "What kind of divine expansion is this?" Legia said to herself, "When I was very young, my teacher told me that I have a younger brother who was just born and was taken away by my despicable mortal father. To be honest, I have always suspected that the teacher is my mother, but she has never admitted this. I used to think that this was impossible. After all, how could a noble person like the teacher marry a mortal? But when I carefully examine your appearance, I find that your eyebrows and eyes are indeed somewhat similar to your teacher's, so our mother may be the target you are looking for, the most powerful witch in the world today. Ms. Angelina." Leon was stunned by her reasoning and said for a long time, "This is all your speculation, but I have never seen my mother. My father and the servants in the castle said she died a long time ago." His intuition told him that what the little witch named Legia said was likely true. But what kind of divine unfolding is this? The son of the most powerful witch in the world suffers from the Black Death, but Baron Tbilisi didn't think of seeking help from this witch. Does he also know that witchcraft cannot save Black Death patients? That makes sense. Why did he still ask himself to come to the witch forest for help? Is it just to make oneself recognize relatives? He feels a bit headache. The two of them were talking like this, calling themselves spiny-backed dragons and heading towards the center of the lake. Gradually, a thick mist rose, followed closely by his eyes, and by the time they fixed their eyes, everything was already upside down. That is a fantastic fairyland world. The elves with a pair of small wings resembling dragonflies flew through the flowers, truly possessing a human-like miniature body. Their hair was colorful and in line with the colors of the flowers and plants. Occasionally, they would carry small flower baskets and fly past the two, leaving behind a faint fragrance of the flowers. They are flower elves, a group of energetic and lovely elves. If you come in without taking a shower, they will definitely hate you. As Legia introduced, she waved goodbye to the spiny-backed dragon and said, "Goodbye, Winchi." The spine-backed dragon's originally ferocious vertical pupils narrowed slightly, resembling a gentle neighbor boy. It nodded and then dived into the water, leaving only a row of sharp spikes gradually fading away. "Keep going, we're almost there." They walked along a small stream, and Liang felt like Lu Lao Lao entering the Grand View Garden. Everything here was so novel and shocking to him. Suddenly, a loud horse hiss sounded in his ear. Liang followed the sound and saw white horses with swan wings and spiral horns searching for berries in the bushes across the bank. Legia smiled and said, "I don't need to introduce it anymore. The legend of unicorns is still very popular in the mortal world. Leon nodded. This supposedly noble and beautiful creature is still well known to people in the 21st century. They also have a good temper, but they are actually a powerful magical creature. You should be polite enough when encountering them in the future. Since knowing that he might be her younger brother, Legia has been much gentler towards him, constantly reminding him of what to pay attention to. After walking for about half an hour, Legia suddenly grabbed his hand and whispered, "Don't make a sound, I'll show you a big guy." A hint of ominous premonition suddenly rose in Liang's heart. She pulled Leon forward quickly and then came to a gray stone mountain, saying, "Let's climb up." Leon couldn't help but say, "Can I refuse?" "No, come with me." The two of them arrived at the mountaintop, and Legia waved her hand. The faint light flickered, and a purple staff appeared out of nowhere. She shouted, "Awakening curse." Subsequently, the earth shook and the mountains shook. Leon suddenly felt his height rise and began to look down at the towering trees. At the same time, an angry voice sounded, "Legia, you're disturbing my rest again." Legia whispered quickly, "This is Your Excellency Andrew, a mountain giant. He actually has a good temper, but he gets a bit angry when he wakes up." Then he opened his voice and said, "Your Excellency Andrew, you have been sleeping for half a month now." Andrew couldn't help but say, "You should know that for us giants, half a month can only be considered a nap." Legia exclaimed loudly, "Just a nap is enough. Why sleep long before death? After death, you can sleep forever. Your Excellency Andrew, could you please take us to the treehouse?" Andrew let out a long sigh, his voice thundering like thunder. "Just know how to trouble me, an elderly person. There is a forbidden space formation personally arranged by Ms. Angelina in the treehouse, and I can only send you to the boundary mountain." Then the two of them shifted their positions and appeared in a forest. Legia said, "If it weren't for Your Excellency Andrew's help, we would have had to walk a long way to reach the treehouse." Leon said, "Didn't you just say it's almost there?" Legia should have said, "Your Excellency Andrew's help is what makes it almost here. Every time I travel back and forth between the forest and the witch's secret realm, I ask for his help." Leon couldn't help but ask, "How often do you usually go out?" Legia smiled and said, "Maybe, but I've been going out a bit more frequently lately, probably 1 or 2 times a month." Leon nodded, a little distressed by the old mountain giant Andrew. Legia said again, "There are many beautiful creatures in the forest that have never set foot on the outside world, so they are unknown. Only in the biographies of explorers can their scales and claws be seen." Leon said sincerely, "It is indeed stunning and beautiful. Being able to live here is a kind of happiness." Legia said, "Since you like it, stay here. The teacher will agree. The Black Death is very scary, even the guardian curse cannot dispel it." Leon said, "I have already recovered, and the probability of getting sick again is very low." Legia frowned with a slightly heroic expression and said, "Suffering from the Black Death must have been a painful experience, right?" End of this chapter. 10, Chapter 10 World Tree. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 World Tree. Liang instinctively flipped through Lion's memories, which were the despair he had tried to avoid observing. Accompanied by a high fever, headache, and a heart-wrenching cough, a painful wail sounded. The once handsome young knight curled up in the damp and cold corner of the wall, trembling and praying time and time again. Then, in despair, he found himself with increasing abscesses and blackening skin, like a corpse waiting for a mouse to bite in the sewer. On the day before his death, he said, "Does God not love me because I am not devout enough? My world is in darkness." Liang shook his head and withdrew his thoughts from the abyss. That was a terrible memory. "Sorry to mention this." Legia comforted softly. Liang wanted to say, "It's okay," but in the end, he couldn't speak up. The intense despair was not something that could be easily brushed off. He forced out a smiling face and abruptly changed the topic, saying, "Is this the witch's home?" "No, we have to cross this mountain to reach it. We call the mountain at our feet Boundary Mountain. Although this secret realm is called the Witch's Secret Realm, only the territory north of Boundary Mountain belongs to us completely, and the rest is freely divided by those legendary creatures. But those legendary creatures all respect the teacher very much because she is the guardian of the entire secret realm. Is Ms. Angelina so powerful? She is the greatest witch, not one of them. Leon couldn't understand the concept of the greatest witch, but he didn't ask deeply, just made a surprised expression and nodded in agreement. If you continue to ask, where is greatness, at this time, your emotional intelligence will be a bit low. Flipping over this small mountain called Boundary Mountain, one can see a blue ripple of a lake connected to the sky and the ground, as if it were a slanted sea surface. This is the Forbidden Space Formation, and no one can pass through except me and the teacher. I'll take you inside. Passing through the Forbidden Array, there is still a forest behind, but at the center of the forest stands an incredibly tall ancient tree, with its huge crown resembling a floating castle, blocking the sky and sun. If the previous, towering giant tree, was just an exaggerated adjective, then this, towering giant tree, is truly deserving of its name. Oh my goodness! Leon was so shocked that he couldn't speak at all. Legia proudly introduced to Leon, this is the Tyrian tree, which is also our residence. My mother said it grew from a branch of the world tree Yggdrasil in Norse mythology, so its growth has no boundaries. It grows taller every year. Every night, there will be countless elves surrounding it, holding firefly parties on it, which will definitely be a novel beauty for you. World Tree Yggdrasil. Isn't this something that only exists in mythology? Yes, he knew from the beginning that there was extraordinary power in this world, but such extraordinary still far exceeded his expectations. He thought it should be from the low demon world. Leon shook his head and said, everything I saw today is already shocking enough. It's hard to imagine what kind of scene you described. It's okay, you'll be able to see it with your own eyes soon. Are only the two witches living on this Tyrian tree? Of course. There is a castle built for us by the elves on the Tyrian tree, which is what I call the witch's house. I thought, witch house, should have many witches. Witches are just a broad term, and in fact, witches are not in the relationship of witches from all over the world united into one family. There are different factions involved, and we have no strict relationship with other witches. Witches in the secular world are generally wild witches, women who have acquired extraordinary abilities by chance. They do not receive systematic guidance from teachers and are pursued by the church and secular nobles. They either die from pursuit or die from the backlash of magic, without the opportunity to gradually increase their magic and study witchcraft. As for the systematic factions of witches, they either shelter from a powerful lord or establish a witch sect in secret locations to systematically cultivate young witches. One of the more famous is the Laclawan school, who are accustomed to wearing pointed wizard hats and long noses, and are fond of using magic brooms as mounts. In the witch school, they have the largest number of people and the strongest overall strength. They are also the only witch school living in a small secret realm besides their teachers. Since the witch's power is so strong, why not control some lords and countries, control more secular forces, and even replace the church's current supreme position? No one has done this before, but those who have done so have been destroyed by the church. Although our mother is one of the strongest witches in the world, the power of the church is like a towering tree, deeply rooted. We will not attempt to challenge or overthrow all of this. The lords and the church of this world belong to us. All we need is this peaceful land under our feet. Does the church also possess this extraordinary power? Liang's mind automatically depicted a figure holding a holy sword, shouting, "The holy light will punish you," while his body shone like a large light bulb. Almost the vast majority of fantasy novels describe how church clergy excel at things like holy light. This is actually understandable. The shining appearance of clergy is definitely much better than the colorful ones, and they can attract more followers. Legia chuckled. If it weren't for extraordinary power, how could the power of the church have expanded to this extent? Leon scratched his head, thinking whether he should memorize the fundamental reasons for the rise of Catholicism, which he had learned in history class. The reason for the rise of any denomination could only be to cater to the needs of rulers, rather than being able to fight them enough. Your statement does not conform to our materialist view of history. However, at first, the church had no extraordinary power, and I'm not quite sure why. I haven't really interacted with the church, and these are all things my mother has said. She told me. The church has the most wealth in the world, with believers spread throughout Europe, and almost every noble territory will build a church and send symbols. Fighting the church is equivalent to being enemies with the whole world. Although secular kings often engage in overt and covert conflicts with the Pope for various interests, it is still their internal conflict. Once people like us intervene, they will immediately stop the internal conflict and turn their guns towards us. Even the witches who shelter under the Lord's command are very secretive, and to their lords, they are more like mercenaries rather than real themselves. Legia, what's wrong with me? Leong shook his head. Can I say I was amazed that you, who thought you were illiterate, could say such wise words? Isn't it true that most women in this era scoff at knowledge and wisdom? It seems that witches are truly the vanguard of women's liberation in the era. Legia said again, there is a magic well left over from ancient times here, and it is because of it that the Tyrian tree withers and thrives. The surroundings of the magic well are the most suitable environment for wizards to practice. I am the same age as you this year, but the magic has surpassed many witches over 100 years old, and a large part of this is thanks to this magic well. Can I also become a wizard? Said Leong with some envy. She shook her head and said, the teacher said you were tested when you were just born, and you don't have the talent to become a wizard. If you are really my fellow brother. This is a very common thing, and there are very few wizards with magical talents, and the vast majority of wizards' magical talents are also very low. This is also the reason why the church has launched activities to hunt witches instead of killing wizards. But this is not a bad thing. Being a baron is also good, and the human world is far more colorful than living in secluded forests and being accompanied by wild beasts and elves. The beauty here is beautiful, and after watching it for a long time, one will eventually get tired of it. Without talent, wouldn't that be muggles? Leong let out a deep sigh, but it wasn't too disappointing. He had a magic hunting hand and would never just be an ordinary person in the future. The extraordinary world was always open to him from beginning to end. But what he lacks now is like starting capital for doing business. With his current strength, if he really starts with a tough approach, he may not even be able to defeat the dwarf demon, let alone hunt down other demons. At least he needs capital to make a profit. And demons are not common, so where to find them is also a problem. End of this chapter.